Hi Not Board Gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the solo experience of this game right here, which is Euthia, Torment of Resurrection, and it's coming back to Kickstarter with its third and final expansion, which I think is called Cruel Frost, on the 2nd of May. Now, it's already been at Kickstarter twice in the past. Originally, it was published by Diea Games, and I got the game originally from the first Kickstarter. And then it came back to Kickstarter, and it funded quite well, but unfortunately, Diea Games hit some problems, and therefore Steamforged stepped in and took over delivering this to backers. And now Steamforged are running the third Kickstarter campaign on the 2nd of May. The link will be in the description below, where you can get Euthia and all of its expansions and all of the whistles and bells that you want for it, if it tickles your fancy. Now, a couple of caveats on this. This is a review copy that was sent to me by the guys at Steamforged. So this is the Steamforged version that I've got here. And secondly, I had recorded another video previously to this where I'd showed some gameplay, etc. And content creator's worst nightmare, I managed to format my memory card with all the footage on there. So I'm not really going to be showing you much about the gameplay. It's going to be a quick overview on the solo, my thoughts on Euthia, and whether it's going to kind of strike a chord for you as a solo gamer. So what is Euthia? Well, it's a kind of a sprawling game with a number of scenarios. I think there are 11 scenarios in total, and it's 1 to 4 players as well. That's right, you can play it 1 to 4, and all of the scenarios can be played 1 to 4 players. And in these scenarios there are various quests and various game-changing rules that are going to be applied as you take on one of the characters, and then you move around the board, upgrading your character, combating different enemies of different strengths, trying to complete the quests, exploring, buying new items, applying those items, unlocking certain slots on your board, and you really get a good sense of kind of progression as your character is starting to develop and grow throughout the adventure. Now, it's a bit of a sandboxy type game where the map tiles are generally all in the bag. There's some starting map tiles that go on the board, but generally the map tiles are in the bag, and when you move onto a space adjacent to a space, you unlock the map tiles next to it. You get the relevant ones out of the bag. Not out of the bag, sorry, out of the piles, and you place it there. And the map tiles are all kind of leveled. There's level 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe a 5 as well. And of course, the higher the level, then the chances the harder the monsters that are going to be on there. So you're going to start the game off with fairly, well, it's not always beatable monsters, but fairly low-level monsters. And as your character progresses, as you're exploring the board state also progresses, and more difficult monsters will come out onto the board as well. So, I say it's a big and sprawling game. Key thing to say on this is it takes up a lot of table real estate. You have to have a big table to play this, because the map, with it being sandboxy and kind of, you expand on it as you progress throughout it, it can take many different directions, and each time you play, that's going to be totally unique as well to the particular game that you're playing, which makes for a really interesting, exciting game, because no two maps as they're constructed will look exactly the same. But as I say, it does require a certain amount of table space. So I say you're going to take the role of one of the, I think there's 6 characters that you get in the game. We have Ale, we have Dral, we have Kalea, we have Melder, we have Skolder, and we have Tessiri as well. So there are 6 player mats that you can choose, and each one is asymmetrical. They come with their own kind of upgrade tokens and tiles, should I say. You get to put on there and adapt and change your character as the game progresses, and you do get a really good kind of RPG feel about it as well. Now, as I say, there are 11 scenarios, I believe, and each one will play very, very differently, and the scenarios also range in length as well. So where's the scenario book? It's here. The scenarios will range in length as well, and the first scenario that most people do is the hunt, which is the easy one, which is a normal difficulty, and that takes kind of 30 minutes per player. Add a little bit on if it's your first game, of course, but if you're used to playing it, then 30 to 40 minutes feels about right. As we go right back to the very final one, which is the banishing of Brassath scenario, which is on the back of the scenario book here, we're looking at 120 minutes per player. So that's a minimum of 2 hours playing time per player as you play the final scenario. Now, they're not sequential. You can play any scenario in any way that you want, and each scenario will add its own kind of unique game-changing rules and maybe bad guys and other effects on there as well. So, you know, you are playing not a vastly different game, but a very different game every time you play, which makes for a really challenging experience. There are, you know, yes, you can play a shorter scenario, but that comes with its own kind of semi-issues, which I'll touch on in a bit. Now, in the Steamforged version and in the Diea Games, the original version, there are a number of miniatures that you get, and you can see here we have all of the kind of the main guys, so your adventurers miniatures just there, and these really nice kind of stonewash miniatures as well as some bad guys like this dragon, etc. In the original Diea Games version that I've got, yes, you could pay for an upgrade on what's called the elementals, but the Steamforged version comes with the actual plastic elemental figures, which, you know, aesthetically make quite a difference on there. They do look very impressive on the game board. And what do elementals do? Well, these are, when tiles are revealed that have elementals on there, they affect all of the hexes around the hex that they're on, and they can do different things. They can be a boon or a disbenefit to you, depending on what the elemental is on there, and they will affect anybody that's in there. So if you're battling a bad guy on a space next to an elemental, then the rules that elemental is introducing to the game will absolutely affect not just you, but also the monsters and the bad guys that you're battling as well. So it's nice to have those. As I say, in my original version that I got when I backed the Kickstarter, those were standees, but I do really like these new plastic version of miniatures as well. So there are some key differences in kind of the version that came out from originally from Diea Games and the version that comes out from Steamforged Games. I think most notably, well, apart from obviously this particular upgrade with these plastic elemental miniatures, is the player boards. Now, in an effort to ensure that backers got their copies when Steamforged stepped in, of course they had to kind of reduce costs a little bit, and these player boards have gone from being a nice thick cardboard to being kind of standard cardstock, so they're a little bit flimsier than what was in the original Diea Games ones, and also they're shiny as well, so if you're not careful you will start to kind of knock things around on there as well. They've also combined a couple of the boards. You have one of the market boards here, and also your kind of round tracker and your score tracker as well. That's been combined. That was on separate boards in the original game, and again it's that same kind of cardstock, so it is a little bit flimsier than what was in the original game. Now, in the original game you could get an upgrade which would allow you, because there's loads of tokens, loads of tiles that you can put out or that you can get access to, be they equipment tiles or be they adventure tiles for particular hexes that you're going on. And in the original game, and I think you can get it as an extra for Steamforged Games, you could get these cardboard kind of storage towers, which also acted as kind of dispensers for the tiles as well. In the Steamforged version, they come with lots of plastic bags, so you're going to have to lay those out separately as well. But, you know, these are minor gripes aside, I think in an effort to kind of step in and deliver the game so that backers could continue to enjoy Euthia, then Steamforged, you know, as I say, they had to reduce the cost to make sure that they weren't losing money on it. And, you know, yeah, there are some concessions made, but they're not game breaking. They're just a bit quality of game, not quality of life, but quality of game for you. So how does the game play solo then? Well, you take one adventurer. I suppose you could play a couple of adventurers if you want to play co-op that way, but you take one adventurer and you're going to move around the board. And let me tell you, movement's quite limited. You get some tokens which kind of dictate what you can do on each turn, and once you spend that token, that's it, it's done. You don't spend it on a particular turn, however. What you can do is save it for the next turn. You can save one token for the next turn. So yeah, movement starts off quite limited. Then by buying certain items, things like boots and other things, you will get the ability to actually have more movement on the map. You can also go to a market and you can buy stuff from the market and sell stuff and exchange stuff. And that's really important, because this sense of progression that you need to have is a key component of the game. It's a true kind of RPG style game where you start off with a character that's got limited abilities, limited power, limited equipment, and the aim by the end of the game is to be in a position where you can finally tackle the objectives of the game. Now, the only way to do that is obviously by upgrading your character throughout. So you're going to have to go and collect resources. You're going to have to collect gems, etc. And gems are really good, and they kind of they can provide different attributes, and they can also provide additions to the equipment that you got, which can enhance their power as well. So you're going to get gems. You're going to get something called GAR as well, and these GAR tokens, which allow you to do certain things in the game. And you're going to collect essences as well, which again give you kind of powers and abilities. But you'll do that as you're progressing through the game, exploring the map, fighting the monsters, getting the benefits from the monsters, and also aiming towards your end objectives. Now, what I will say is, no matter which scenario I played, and over time I played quite a few scenarios of Euthia, it's very, very tight in what you can do. So, you know, there's no real benefit to you in kind of exploring the board. You've always got to keep your end goal in mind. What am I trying to achieve here? How best can I move towards this in my turn, because, you know, there are a number of rounds per scenario, and that means your actions or your moves or your abilities on each round are going to be relatively limited. So you've got to try and optimize exactly what you do. But as I say, from a solo perspective, it's not a problem. You've got, well, not a problem. It's not a problem to play it solo. You're controlling one character, and having that ability on your character to kind of do different things is really, really good. And the sense of progression is also great. If you're playing two characters, it's a little bit more complicated. You will get some occasional interplay between them, but in reality, for solo, you are best off playing true solo as just one character. So we have a number of scenarios. We have this really good kind of RPG element as you're building up your character and feeling the strength of your character increase as you go through the game. We have a big sprawling epic game which gives you 11 different scenarios that you can choose, and that's just in the base game. Of course, if you've got the previous expansion or you're getting the Cruel Frost, there'll be additional ones with additional tiles. So it's got a lot in the mix, but there are a couple of caveats to this game. Like all RPG style games, as you say, you're starting off with a character with limited abilities and limited equipment. The early part of the game can feel a little bit grindy, so you've got to be aware going into this game that the grind is there, and it has to be. It's just an element of these types of games. There's no way to kind of circumvent that whilst you're powering up your character to enable it to do what you want to do. That means, you know, the kind of first couple of rounds in every game that you play, you're constantly thinking about ways to get better. What can I do? What is on the map? How can I best use my abilities on this map, or my moves on this map, to maximize what my character can do? Because if you don't get those foundations right in the early game, the end game is going to be off for you while you're trying to achieve it. That's it. Moving around the map is limited depending on the amount of movement that you've got, but there are also portals on the map which allow you to zip around the map from portal to portal, and that really helps as you're looking at the map state, this emergent map state, as you're going about your quest to try and, I say, optimize what you can do. Make sure you're thinking about your character early game. What do I need to do, not only for the end game, but what do I need to do for the mid game as well? How strong do I need to be to allow me to take on the level 2, the level 3, or the elite monsters that can come out? The other thing is about the game, as well as the amount of table space it takes, is that it takes a fair amount of time to set up and to tear down as well. You know, there are lots of moving parts in Euthia. And therefore, you know, the play time of 30 minutes for the hunt scenario, or 120 minutes for the final scenario, which is the banishing of Brassath, you need to potentially add another 30 minutes on top of that for setup and teardown, because setup and teardown is long in this game. There are so many moving parts that you're going to have to get out onto the floor. So you're probably talking around about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes per game setup, and then 10 to 15 minutes per game tear down on the back end of it as well. So when you're going into Euthia and you think, right, you know, I want to do a shorter scenario, or, you know, I've got a limited amount of time, you've got to add that kind of 25, 30 minutes on, in total onto that. And that can be a bit off-putting for some people as well. When it comes to the scenarios, it's great that you've got, you know, shorter scenarios like the Hunt on there, and the next one is called Imminent Threat, which is 40 minutes per player. But to really get the most out of Euthia, you really want to explore those longer scenarios. Because, you know, because it's such a tight game, and you know, in your kind of 30-minute game, how many game rounds is it? Your 7 game rounds that you've got there. You've got 7 rounds to actually get your character into where you want to be, and it's not really enough to start exploring the depths of your character. So those early scenarios are good to give you a taste of what to do, but in reality, you're going to get the most out of the game if you start playing the longer scenarios. And I think that's a really key and important bit. Don't get this game thinking you can set it up, play it, and put it away in about an hour, because you're not going to get the most out of the game. You're going to need to want to play those longer scenarios where you're exploring exactly what your character can do, how they can do things, how they can grow, how they can get better, how they can achieve these different objectives. And you're going to have to play an hour's game and lose as well at the same time, because you're not going to win every scenario, certainly not from the off. Now, when it comes to the monsters themselves, I say there are different levels of monsters, 1, 2, and then there might be a 3, and then elites as well. And these are kind of randomly generated from a pack that you pull out. Now, in the multiplayer game, what happens is another player would control that monster and they would battle you, effectively. In the solo game, it works differently. You're going to roll a couple of dice, and that's going to tell you what that monster is going to do based on the AI cards that come with the for the solo play. So it is a little bit different, but it still plays very, very well. And there are mitigation strategies that you can do. Some of your equipment will allow you to strike first, or it will allow you to change the face of dice that are rolled on there, or it will allow you to negate some of the dice that the monster's got. But the monster is also going to use some tokens which allow it to get access to gold cards, and gold cards provide a little bit more of a tough combat. You see there are silver and gold cards. You're going to collect them in the solo game, and essentially you would use them in the multiplayer game, but in the solo game all you do is you collect them and convert them for resources. When the monster comes to get them, every time they get, I think it's 4 or 5 silver cards, they convert that to a gold card. And on the back of the silver and the gold cards, you've got different attack kind of philosophies on there. And the gold ones are obviously harder, if you like. So it's best to try and stop that monster getting as many gold cards as possible. It's going to be difficult because when you take a gold or a silver card, they automatically get one as well. So their potential to do more devastating attacks to you kind of increases with your success in the game as well. I'd say the monsters themselves are randomly generated from the pack, and that can seem a little bit kind of weird, and also kind of the strength of the monsters, depending on how your attacks go, can feel a little bit weird as well. I know I was playing with somebody and they didn't like that their character got defeated by a giant dragonfly. They didn't feel that because it was randomly pulled out of the pack, that a giant dragonfly would have defeated their character. So it can, I mean, some people, it doesn't bother me because I make the connections and you can tell the story yourself. But for some people, it can cause that little bit of a disconnect when you're a fairly strong character and you just have some bad luck in the battle, and yeah, your character gets defeated by a relatively low giant dragonfly or whatever. But again, that's just the nature of adventure games. Sometimes they go your way, sometimes they don't. The whole point of leveling up is to try and have that mitigation against things like that happening, certainly with the lower characters. The fight can be challenging. Now, when you die in the game, you don't necessarily die. You go back to the main church, basically, and then your character will start again. But yeah, also, although you continue playing the game, what it doesn't mean is that you've lost out on the ability to get the rewards from defeating that monster, and those rewards can be really, really important in terms of kind of choosing how you upgrade your character. So, you go into battles not sparingly, but with the knowledge that you really want to battle these monsters. Sometimes they're unavoidable because of where you are on the map and where you need to be on the map. There's no way to get to where you need to be without going through some monsters. And if that's the case, then the battles can come, and they can be a bugger. And you may find yourself in some occasions where you're fighting a monster that is above the level of what you think you need to be to beat it, and therefore you're just going to have to battle it, potentially lose, start again. But that can give you a benefit because it's putting you back on a map in a church which is in a different area. You may have portals which allow you to get over there, but it can be a little bit disheartening when you're kind of knocked out because you had to fight, but your character was at a place where you knew that the fight was going to potentially end in a loss. So yeah, it's I had the game originally, Euthia. When I backed it, I played it, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't playing it enough, so then I sold it. Steamforged has sent me this copy back through, and I've played it quite a few times now since Steamforged sent me this copy back through, and I've really grown to love my time with Euthia, and I think, you know, it's telling this big and epic kind of story, this sprawling story where I feel like my character is getting stronger, but I am aware of the time, the grind, potential grind in the early game, and sometimes not the swinginess, but the unfairness of how the game progresses. So, final thoughts on Euthia, Torment of Resurrection. I say it's back out on Kickstarter on the 2nd of May. Link will be in the description below. As I say, I had the original, and I then kind of, you know, ended up getting rid of it because I wasn't getting it to the table. And it's not I didn't enjoy it; I really enjoyed it. It just took up a lot of time, and my space just wasn't, and the amount of stuff I had to do at that time just wasn't cognizant to keeping the game. And then when when Steamforged sent Euthia back to me a few weeks ago, I went from kind of liking the game, getting rid of it, to now kind of loving the game. It really is an absolutely fantastic game. A quick thing, if you want to go and see exactly how it plays, Mark Monk over at Diea Games has done a couple of videos on Euthia and on the new expansion Cruel Frost as well. Highly recommend you go and watch Mark Monk's channel. That's Diea Games if you want to see how Euthia works as a game. Mark is kind of excellent at what he produces, and I really recommend going and looking at that and seeing if it's worthwhile. So yeah, I've gone from liking it a lot to getting rid of it to absolutely kind of being in love with it a little bit. I can't wait to get it back to the table. Now, there are some downgrades in the Steamforged version from the original Diea Games version. They're just kind of quality of stuff to ensure that you got them. You can, of course, buy all the additions and all the extras, etc., to really bling out your game. I'm certain they'll be available on the Kickstarter. It's completely up to you if you do that. Even if you just get the base game, you've got enough here with 11 scenarios to keep you going. Spoke about the scenarios as well. There are 11 scenarios. The shorter scenarios are good to give you a flavour of the game, but you really need to play the game, the longer scenarios, to get the most out of the game, to really start feeling the power of your character, and to understand that those early kind of rounds where you were grinding a little bit, you know, they're more than made up for by the later rounds, where you feel this big, strong character. The sense of asymmetry for each character is also excellent as well. Each character will grow in a very, very different way depending on what comes out in the markets or on, as you're adventuring on the board. So the sense of growth for each character is highly unique and asymmetrical because they've also got their own tiles to put on there. Do bear in mind that it's a big table hog. If you have a small playing space, then Euthia is not going to be for you. It's a game that demands a large portion of your table, and as I mentioned earlier, you can't necessarily tell in which way the game is going to go. And as I say, time-wise, yeah, you've got to have that 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning and at the end in terms of setup and tear down. It takes quite a while to set up and tear down. So once you've added that on, even on the 30-minute scenario, you're looking at least an hour's play time basically. As we get up to the longer scenarios, which are 2 hours, you're probably looking at 2.5 hours in reality, probably closer to 3, because you will hit some spaces where your decision space is kind of wide and varied, and you've got to think about the next move that you make. If all those things are not an issue to you then I highly recommend Euthia Torment of Resurrection as a solo game. It gives me, whilst not quite a Dungeons and Dragons feel, it gives me that RPG feel in a game. Despite those early rounds being a little bit similar in all of the scenarios, once I've got over that, I'm suddenly creating a vastly unique character that feels like it's growing. I tell these epic tales, and you have to have the ability to kind of join the dots yourself and make the story yourself. Why are they going there? What are they doing this for? If you've got that, you're going to create these wonderful, wonderful tales. I have played it with other people, and most of them have enjoyed it. I say one of them not so much because he didn't like how the monsters came out and didn't like being beaten by a giant dragonfly. But so, bear that in mind, that if you're going to play it with other people, then they have to be in the mindset that this is their type of game to play. But all told, production-wise, it's not quite as good as the original, but you can buy all the whistles and bells to get it extra. But there are some upgrades as well in terms of this. I really, really enjoy my time with Euthia. I'm so glad it's come back into my life because, it was a game that I'd liked, not written off, but I hadn't done. And now I'm like, how can I clear my diary? How can I get 2 or 3 hours available so that I can sit down and play a really long scenario of Euthia, Torment of Resurrection? So yes, highly recommended with the caveats that I mentioned earlier. So there we go. Thank you very much for joining me on this journey through Euthia, Torment of Resurrection. As I say, it comes back to Kickstarter on the 2nd of May. The link will be in the description below. If it looks like your type of game, go and check out some other videos. Certainly go and check out Mark Monk's Diea Games for his videos on Euthia and also on the expansion Cruel Frost, which is part of the new Kickstarter. Thank you very much for joining me on this journey through Euthia. My name's Mark. This is Not Board Gaming. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought. If you can't find anyone else to play with, then there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.